We're back on In Focus tonight. Thanks for staying on. Professor Darelle from Greunen says that time is not on South Africa's side when it comes to the ICT education. She says for every year we do not achieve e-readiness in our schools, our learners fall behind. Let's talk to the professor now, who is the director of Center for Community Technologies at the Nelson Mandela University. Prof, good evening. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight here on In Focus. You and I currently are having this conversation via this digital platform. It's something that happened during the time of COVID when we couldn't have people in studio. Now it has almost become a norm that this is where we have and hold these kinds of conversations. But what actually happened was that a lot of our kids lagged behind in townships because they couldn't do what we are doing right now. Did we catch a wake-up call? Are we closing the gap and are we doing what is necessary?
Evening, Tabo, and thank you for having me this evening. Yes, it's a stark reality that COVID brought to us. And I think what it emphasized is the fact that we really need to do the catch-up game within the South African environment. We were forced to go to the online platforms, but of course, you know, as we well know, our country is not entirely ready for that, and our schooling system most certainly not. So as much as we went online for children to be educated, of course, many of our children were left behind. Firstly, because they don't have access, and secondly, they may not even have the proper devices. So hopefully our country has now caught a slight wake-up in terms of this, and we can afford the opportunity to our learners to actually, you know, get on board and have access to the global world.
Yeah. What are the glaringly obvious things that we should be doing that we are not doing, or maybe we are doing in half measures and we would need to accelerate on?
I think one of the most important things is to understand that when you go online, it is not just merely having a conversation like you and I are having now. It is planning the way in which you convey the teaching material. So it means that a school and the governing body, the teachers, they all must have the know-how, the expertise, the experience, and probably most importantly, the will to do this. You could have the best infrastructure in the world, but if you do not have the will and the know-how of how to use that, it's not going to assist you in any way. So I think that is probably one of the most important things. And we often stand up and shout and say, let's put internet into all our schools, which is wonderful. That is what we want. But are our teachers adequately equipped to deal with that? Are they prepared to go online? You know, universities went through that whole fees must fall time period, and even universities were caught off guard in the time of COVID. So how much more not schools? So I think first and foremost, let's ensure that we have the right will, the policies to deal with this, because of course with that comes a whole host of other things, such as cybersecurity and all sorts of other things. But then also equipping our teachers to be able to offer to the learners what they need to learn.
Yeah. One of the MECs in this current administration, in Gauteng in particular, MEC Panyaza Lesufi, adamant that e-schooling is the future, and he has been building a couple of them, successfully so some, but of course with dark consequences in some instances, devices being stolen, vandalism and so on and so forth. Where these schools have been built, do you think there is significant difference that it actually brings to the learners?
I think that yes, to an extent, and it depends on the extent to which they are integrated into the system. But yes, I do believe there is some difference, at least when your learners leave school there and they come to the higher education sector or go into the job market. They've been exposed to technology and integrating technology into their daily lives. But of course, there are many challenges that come with that as well, as you've mentioned. You know, there are security issues and devices, etc., etc. But it does give that slight edge to learners who have actually had exposure to that. And I think it's important that we need to think futuristic. And I'm not talking about, sort of out of this world, just thinking about the future jobs. We are training people for a new job market. Post-COVID, we are in a situation where there are jobs being created that we did not even know existed before this. I mean, we've all become epidemiologists and data scientists overnight. So what are we equipping our learners with? And I think that is the crux of the matter in terms of those who have been exposed to using online platforms, etc., to those who've never been exposed to that. And that should be our focus at this point in time.
Yeah. And you're saying that exposure starts with public libraries. Tell us about the experiences you saw in Ethiopia and in Uganda.
Yes, public libraries are such an important part of our lives. If you think back when we were children, and let me not give away my age, but I mean, we used to go to the library as a weekly thing, Nowadays, libraries in South Africa have become a non-entity. So we went to East Africa and I visited some of the public libraries there. And let's use the one in Addis, which is a project of the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, where you have this fantastic facility with 5 stories equipped with free Wi-Fi throughout. People can bring their laptops, their devices, bring your own device, connect to the internet, free, roam, search information. There are different sections with online libraries, repositories of information, a special section for early childhood development, even for mothers who are nursing young babies to understand better about how to take care of children. What a wonderful concept that is. And imagine if we could create that within our South African context. One of the beauties that struck me, we went to visit this library on a Sunday, and the library was packed to the brim with people coming in, and that is what they do. They tell us that on average they have between 2,000 and 3,000 visitors per week in the library. That is unheard of in South Africa. So why can we not recreate that?
Now, Prof, the center that you're a director of has come up with a tool called an ICT maturity assessment tool. Tell us about that particular tool and what it does, and how do we incorporate that into our strategy going forward?
Some few years ago, we were approached by the Department of Science and Innovation, who worked on a project in Tsoffenbaba in the Chris Hani district in the rural Eastern Cape. And they asked us to work with them to develop a tool that schools can use to assess their ICT readiness. Now, it's wonderful to understand what your ICT readiness maturity level is. So are you at a 1 or a 2 or a 3? But then so what? I mean, that's always the question. So we developed a tool that assists you as a principal or a governing body member or even a district official to rate your school's maturity level based on a number of questions, a series of questions, and then we have some artificial intelligence in the background that does the calculations, and it says, let's say your school is at a moderate level of maturity. So in order to improve the maturity level, you have to do the following X, Y, Z. And it allows schools to plan, to budget. It also allows the Department of Basic Education to do better planning and better budgeting. So we're now entering the next phase of this project, whereby the tool will be rolled out to all 26,000 schools in South Africa. And the aim is to use that to gauge the ICT readiness levels of the schools and then help them to gain a better level of maturity in their school. But also not only in terms of infrastructure, because we always just think of infrastructure, but also looking at the staff readiness, the learner readiness, and the community readiness, because ultimately when you put connectivity into a school, you're not only putting it into a school, you're putting it into a community per se.
Yeah. And what are some of the indicators in terms of data point that you put into this tool that can inform your level of readiness?
So some of the data points would be the infrastructure and looking at infrastructure in the broadest sense of the word, connectivity, what kind of connectivity is in the school, And then also the current curriculum in use and the digital content that is available. And then also very important, our teacher development and support. What is available to teachers? Do they understand how to use the technology, and do they know how to integrate it into their curriculum?
Yeah. Many people are saying, for example, when they're criticizing the MEC of Education, they're saying, well, you're bypassing some of the basic things. Just get textbooks in schools right first before you even move into laptops or even tablets. Do you think we could be able to bypass that particular aspect of things and go straight to e-learning, just like we did bypassing the landlines and in lightning speed? We all have cell phones in our homes now.
Yeah. So I think for me it's a very simple answer. As long as you provide access to information, whether it is in the format of a textbook or whether it is in a digital format, the crux of the matter is providing access to information. What will keep our learners relevant? What will keep them up to date? And in that sense, when we go the digital route, of course, that makes better sense. And also it is, in the long run, far more cost effective. If you were to go into homes, how many textbooks do you find lying around there? How many people keep textbooks, and those textbooks are outdated? They cost a lot of money. I'm not saying do away with textbooks. I'm saying look at e-textbooks, for example. Far more cost effective, accessible, and you can keep them, and it's easy to use. So let's just think a little bit out of the box here and not be confined by the norms and practices that we've used for the past how many years.
Professor Darelle van Greunen, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. Professor there at the Nelson Mandela University. She is the director of the Center for Community Technologies and saying it is time to up the ante, so to speak, and accelerate our move into the digital age. After